Hi guys, my name is Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Well, I hope you guys had an absolutely wonderful holiday season and you are ready to ring in the new year. But Vanessa, I hear you say, why have we not done any snow scenes yet this year? Well, I'm about to take care of that for you. So today we're going to paint this nice little snow scene right here, and we are going to paint it all in one color. I'm just going to show you how to do this monochromatically, so it should be a lot of fun. So let's do this. Here are the materials that I've used today. Go ahead and pause and screenshot, or they're listed in the description for you. I'm going to start out with the sky, and this is very, very, very light, almost white. So I'm just wetting the entire thing, sky area, and I'm dropping in a extremely light tint of this Paynes gray here. And I'm going to let that dry completely. And then I'm going to come back in and re-wet this part right in the middle. That is the very, very far distant trees. And I'm mixing up kind of a lighter consistency. It's going to be lighter than everything else. And I'm just adding in these tree shapes in the far distant. And then I'm going to come back in with some darker areas for some shadow and some definition. But you don't want too much definition here because it's so far in the distance. I've allowed all of that to dry as well, and now I've mixed up some slightly darker Paynes gray, and I have not re-wet this because I don't really want it to spread as much since it is closer to us and it won't be as kind of hazy. So I'm just adding this in. We're just going to cover the entire area kind of almost in a flat wash, except for the edges there where I'm making it kind of appear like the evergreen type leaves and foliage. And I'm just adding in like darker bits as well for kind of the shadow type areas. Now that the paint on the right side has had a chance to kind of sink into the paper, I'm going to come back in with a palette knife, and I'm going to scrape in some of those like lighter trunk and branches that you see in the photo. And that, as long as you wait long enough, it should just stay white like that. Sometimes you have to go back over it if the paint fills it back in, but it basically scrapes back in highlights. Next, this tree bank on the left is the closest one to us, so it is going to be even darker than the one on the right side. So I'm just making sure to mix up a nice darker Paynes gray for this. And I'm just going to go ahead and add in all of these tree shapes. Since these trees are so much closer to us, I'm just making sure to add more dimension and more detail. And now that I have them kind of roughly blocked in, I'm coming back in with an even thicker consistency of that Paynes gray, and I'm adding some shadows. Now normally I would give you fun facts about the location. I actually don't know what the location is on this one, but it sort of looks like Narnia, doesn't it? Like maybe I should have added a lamppost. However, if a white witch turns up and offers you some Turkish delight, I don't know that I would advise that. And now comes the fun part. We're going to work on the water and all of the reflections therein. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to wet the entire water space. I'm going to paint around all the little islands and the little peninsula type areas. And I'm just going to make sure and get this entire area wet. And then after the water soaks in for a second, I begin to drop in all of those various shades of Paynes gray. Whatever is above it, you want to drop in beneath it. So you also want to make sure that each tree shape is directly beneath the one that's above it. I realized here that I started painting too quickly, so I took a shop towel and took some of that water out because I didn't want it to just spread into oblivion. I want it to retain some of its shape. And as this kind of dries and starts to soak in, we're going to come back in and add darker and darker pigment for the darker and darker areas. And as it dries a little bit, it will kind of retain more of its shape of how you add it. And that's how you get the really dark darks in here. And for the lighter areas, you can take a damp brush and lift some of the color out if you add too much in there. And we're also using a damp brush to lift out the areas underneath the snowbanks. Then we're going to let this whole area completely dry. Now that it's dried completely, I do think there are some areas that could definitely be darker because you can see how dark the areas above in the original scene are. So I'm re-wetting the entire area, then I add a little bit of that gray for the sky because I kind of forgot to do that originally. And then I am coming back in and just darkening up all of these areas that need to be darker. Since this particular painting is lacking in the fun facts category, I'll go ahead and tell you some fun shenanigans that I had in the snow. Back when I was in college, we actually decided to go out into the country and find a nice long hill and take a flat-bottomed boat with us. So 5 of us would get into the boat and then we would push it down the hill. And it was all fun and games until we almost landed into the icy pond, but you know. It was still pretty fun, I'm not gonna lie. Now that I have allowed all of this to dry, I'm gonna come back in and lift some areas out so that we can have some ripple effects and some lighter kind of reflections in here. So I've got one of my tiny little chisel blenders and I am just adding some water to it, rubbing it back and forth, and then using a shop towel to dab that out. And then you can see that what that is doing is adding some kind of ripple effects as well. Then in the white areas, I'm using the same tiny little brush to add in some very watery Paynes gray, little ripples in the opposite color as well. For some detail in the snowbank area, I'm just adding in some very watery Paynes gray. Obviously the whole thing's Paynes gray. And then I'm using some clean water to spread the edges of that and blend it into the snowbanks. What about a little history on the color Paynes gray? It was created by British painter William Payne. Originally made by mixing Prussian blue, yellow ochre, and crimson lake, he created it as a less intense alternative to black. Now that all of that has dried, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to use some white gouache to add in all of the snow on the trees. Now you could have masked this out and then come back in and painted around it. I just felt like it's much easier to do like this. So I'm using some white gouache straight out of the tube directly onto the top of all of that Paynes gray. Now in this very far distance here, I am just adding it in, but then I'm going to come back in with some water and just blend it all in so that it's not quite so detailed, because in the distance it's going to be very fuzzy. So you don't want it to be too defined, otherwise it won't look like the distance. I think I got a little bit too carried away with my white gouache. Like for instance, this little tree right here in the front, you can't actually see that that's a separate tree from the one behind it. So I'm coming back in with my Paynes gray and I am just going to add some definition in some places to where you can see that these are separate trees. I'm just going to come in with a medium consistency of my color, and I'm going to add in the shadow along the bank. Now I'm going to take a very small brush, in this case it's a number 4 round, and I'm just going to add in some of these sticks and twigs and just the little details in the snowbanks. Now for this area of brush over here, I am going to turn my brush on its side and use a very dry mix, and I'm going to dry brush in that whole area. Then once I get it kind of covered, I'm going to come back in with an even darker mix and add some variation in that color. And here's the finished piece, all nice and dry and with the tape removed. And doesn't it look like a nice tranquil little place to visit? I mean, I guess as long as you had enough layers, because that looks real cold too. And there you have it, a nice little snow scene done monochromatically. Just a lovely little exercise to keep you guys thinking about your values. I mean, your tonal values, but anyways, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that fun stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I will see you again in 2 weeks.